Okay, so in this second podcast on gooseberry season, I'll just carry on looking at the poem after the end of the second stanza. So we've looked at the first one, we've talked a little bit about how this man just arrives seemingly from nowhere. We don't know anything about the man either. He's not named, we don't even know whether the narrator knew him. It's most bizarre. One evening he mentioned a recipe for smooth, seedless gooseberry sorbet, but by then I was tired of him, taking pocket money from my boy at cards, sucking up to my wife, and on his last night, sizing up my daughter. He was smoking my pipe as we stirred his supper. So this man has absolutely got his feet under the table. He is flirting with the daughter, he's flirting with the wife, he's stealing money from his son, he's being thoroughly objectionable, he's being really very unpleasant. He's what we would call completely abusing the hospitality of the host, the narrator of the poem. It seems odd that the gooseberry sorbet is just mentioned there seemingly at random, because it doesn't seem to fit in anywhere else in the poem. We'll talk about the gooseberry, the idea of the gooseberry later. Then we have a very odd stanza thrown into the middle of the poem. Where does the hand become the wrist? Where does the neck become the shoulder, the watershed and then the weight? Whatever turns up and tips us over that razor's edge between something and nothing, between one and the other. We've had three stanzas which are very narrative driven, they're very basic, they're very simple, they're not particularly poetic. Locked his dog in the coal bunt and not a stroke of work, sucking up to the wife, taking money from the boy at cards. And then all of a sudden, Simon Armitage moves away from the poem. Imagine him kind of focusing in on the details, and then as if it's a series of close-ups, and then pulling back, as if he's a cameraman pulling back, and he comments on the moment that the man makes up his mind that this man can no longer stay in the house. And he asks two questions. Where does the hand become the wrist? Where does the neck become the shoulder? Where does one thing become another? He talks about the watershed, and the watershed is the moment where something flips, something changes, something snaps. Where does the hand become the wrist? Where do we go from putting up with another person to no longer being able to put up with another person? So he's asking himself, what was it that really pushed me over the edge? Was it sucking up to the wife? Was it sizing up the daughter? Was it smoking the pipe? Between one thing and the other, between putting up with someone and, in this case, murdering them. Pretty big jump. Notice at no time do we get the narrator saying, and I told him not to do this, and I told him not to do that, and he ignored me, and I told him he had to leave. No, not at all. We go from the man just completely making himself at home to being drowned in the bath. That razor's edge between something and nothing, between doing nothing about it and doing something about it. So it's quite strange in the way that we pull back and we get that very poetic stanza, and it's in that poetic stanza that the decision is made. But he doesn't say the decision is made, he just says, when did it change in me? When did it go from being, I can cope with this man, to I can no longer cope with this man? He could have told him that, but didn't bother. He could have told him that something had changed and flipped inside him, but he didn't bother. What he did instead is ran him a bath, held him under, dried him off, dumped him in the back of a pickup. The boy went through his pockets to make sure there was nothing on him that could identify him or the murderers, dragged him like a mattress, threw him over the border. From one thing to another, from coping to killing. No justification, no excuse, no saying I did it because. What flipped? How can anyone go from putting up with someone to getting rid of them? It's a big question that I think Armitage asks in this poetry. In the next stanza we'll talk a little bit about the gooseberries and look at the final stanza linking into stanza 3.